we are, effectively, there is at the moment a quasi-border in the Irish Sea, and that has actually meant the disapplication of fundamentals of the Articles of the Act of Union of 1801. This is a fundamental question for unionists in Northern Ireland, and we need to respect their position. And whilst compromise is something that all of us should and will be willing to consider, there are certain issues with EU law and ECJ jurisdiction that just have to be dealt with. I agree that compromise is justified and necessary in resolving this issue, but the history of Northern Ireland over recent decades indicates that for a solution to stick, for something to be viable and workable and to last, it needs to be able to gather support from both sides of the community. And again, just a few tweaks to customs processes, I don't think is going to be enough, because sadly it would leave Northern Ireland still subject to extensive single market laws over which it has no influence. And also, I can't see in the coverage any indication of how the complexities around export of food between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is going to be dealt with, because that's actually not a customs problem. That relates to so-called SPS rules. And unless you resolve that as well, you're not even a tenth of the way to resolving the problems with the protocol.
So if we see a deal along the lines of what we're expecting now, which is this much discussed red lane, green lane solution on customs checks, that's not going to be enough for yourself and many of your Brexit supporting Conservative colleagues to be happy with. Is that right?
I know from long experience that it's best not to reach a view on a deal, a compromise, until we actually see it. I do continue to believe that we need to make sure that Northern Ireland's place in the UK's internal market is protected, and we need to make sure that Northern Ireland isn't subjected to laws over which they have no control. Sure, if someone is exporting down south to the Republic of Ireland into the EU single market, then absolutely they need to comply with the EU rules. But if you are not in Northern Ireland, you shouldn't have to worry about them. You shouldn't have headaches from the protocol. So if any deal does come forward, obviously I'd look at it very seriously. Of course, I'd be keen to back it if I can, because I want this problem fixed and I want power sharing restored in Northern Ireland. I know how damaging it is to have that absence of a devolved government, but it's almost impossible to give you any kind of view on this when all we've got is speculative articles and denials by ministers that were anywhere near an agreement.
Don't you think it's time the Conservative Party will get behind Rishi Sunak, sort of whatever deal he strikes there? You can see he's negotiating hard, and your party's thrown out 2 prime ministers in the last 12 months. Surely this time you'll get behind him come what may, won't you?
We will certainly want to. If it's a deal we possibly can back, I'm sure we will back it. But we do need to safeguard Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom. We are, effectively, there is at the moment a quasi-border in the Irish Sea, and that has actually meant the disapplication of fundamentals of the Articles of the Act of Union of 1801. This is a fundamental question for unionists in Northern Ireland, and we need to respect their position. And whilst compromise is something that all of us should and will be willing to consider, there are certain issues with EU law and ECJ jurisdiction that just have to be dealt with. And I think it's important to remember that the protocol itself recognises that it should be superseded in time. It was negotiated under Article 50 of the EU treaties, which is very clear that cannot be used to make permanent arrangements. When the protocol was agreed, no one ever expected it to become the permanent solution. So asking for changes to it is entirely legitimate on the part of the UK government.
Aren't you worried, though, that you might not have the British public behind you on this? I mean, we've heard endlessly that people want to get Brexit done. They voted for a Prime Minister a few years ago who's supposed to have got it done with an oven-ready deal. We've seen the polling recently that shows support for Brexit is rather sliding off a cliff now. Wouldn't you be wiser just to back whatever deal your leader can get you, and so we can all just move on?
Well, as I said, I very much hope a deal will come forward that I can back. I absolutely recognise that people want to get Brexit done. It isn't properly done in relation to Northern Ireland yet. I think it has been delivered successfully for Great Britain, and I welcome that, and we're already seeing some of those benefits. But when it comes down to it, we have to safeguard the integrity of the United Kingdom. It's a political union that's worked incredibly well for centuries. We want to safeguard Northern Ireland's place in it, and to do that, we have to make some very significant changes to the protocol.
Just finally, are you concerned you might not get the chance to have a say on this? I mean, it's not exactly clear if there's even going to be a vote on the Commons on whatever deal the Prime Minister comes back with. What will you do then?
I would say it's pretty much inconceivable that changes to the protocol could go through and be implemented by the government without votes in Parliament. This is such a fundamental question that I think MPs will need to be able to give their view on it. I can't conceive of circumstances where Parliament could be cut out of this question.
You'd be very unhappy if there was no vote then?
I just think that inevitably there will be a vote. It would be a political impossibility to take a set of changes through without a parliamentary vote.